Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Perfectly Designed. So in the poll, I had Fiddlesticks and Twisted Fate for the first two episodes, and they were the top two choices, so today we'll be featuring Twisted Fate, the Card Master, one of the most iconic mid laners in the game, and in my humble opinion, living proof that you don't need to make a super flashy character for them to be a well-designed one. I mean, this guy literally has only two active abilities that do the same thing over and over again. Twisted Fate is a champion with much respect. He may not elicit the same kind of fear or perhaps annoyance as the likes of the more obnoxious champions in League like Akali, Evelynn, Yasuo and such, but just about every player worth their salt understands that if there's a TF on the enemy team, they need to be ready to deal with point-and-click stuns and the possibility that every 1v1, 2v2 or 3v3 could actually be a 1v2, 2v3 or 3v4. He's got one of the most simple kits in the game, yet somehow contributes so much pressure. In a time where champions are growing increasingly volatile and overloaded, it's refreshing to see even basic champions that can find adequate success. TF has the distinct honor of being one of the most balanced champions in all of League of Legends, at least in the top 5. The first place trophy I already gave to Zilean, but for an extremely long time, he hasn't seen a major buff or nerf in like 4 years, as ever since the minor 20 damage nerf to his Q in patch 5.24, he would not receive another balance change until 9.19. Given how Riot instates close to 25 patches a year, that means he was able to stay completely neutral for over 100 patches, and not because he was one of those champions no one played. He had a very respectable pick rate, averaging about 10% for the latter half of the decade. Only recently in the past 2 years did he start to fall off just a little bit, which is why he's not in why everyone plays. People know him for two things: point and click stun and a virtually global ultimate that counters basically any stealth champion. To this day, he remains the only champion who can do this, and with extreme consistency. It's this unique set of skills that gives him a very loyal following, especially Dopa, who's been widely touted as the greatest solo queue player in history before there was a history. Much of Twisted Fate's success relative to his simplicity stems from the fact that he's the true embodiment of a catcher. What are the two most important things you need to be a catcher? Range and lockdown. Range can be either actual range as in a long distance projectile or gap closes like dashes, in which case TF has both, making him the best catcher in the game, period. It's funny because he's considered a burst mage, and yes, technically speaking, his whole combo is gold card, Q, then third auto for electrocute proc, but hardly anyone considers his burst to be on par with actual burst mages like Syndra or Annie. They just know him for his stun. That's not to say he can't do his fair share of damage, because no, he most certainly can. There are a lot of champions with global ultimates that allow them to quickly travel from one point to another: Talia, Shen, Nocturne, Pantheon, and Galio, but none of them are quite as flexible or reliable as TF's, who can not only teleport to wherever he wanted, but also granted true sight of every enemy champion, which prevented you from baiting him out by hiding in Fog of War. What makes him such an incredibly designed champion is that he's equipped with just the right tools needed to do what he has to do. No more than that. That's all thanks to Pick a Card. Every time you press W, you have a selection of one of 3 cards. Locking one in causes his next basic attack to deal bonus magic damage plus an additional effect. If you chose blue, you restore a huge amount of mana. Choose red and your attack does AoE damage sort of like Tiamat and slows all enemies hit. Choose the gold card and your attack stuns the target. Each of these cards has something to bring to the table. Blue card allows you to sustain your mana in lane indefinitely, which is necessary since Twisted Fate has pretty steep mana costs given that his Q and W drain 100 each. A max rank blue card refunds you 150, which means so long as you don't spam Q over and over again, you can effectively have an infinite supply of mana. If you're in need of wave clear or if enemies are clumped together, the red card allows your next attack to hit multiple targets, which may be a better choice than gold card because that only hits one. Usually one red card and Q is enough to pretty much clear an entire wave. And of course, everyone knows what gold card does. In an effort to add more skill expression to the game, Riot has been phasing out a lot of champions with point and click hard crowd control because obviously without untargetability, there's no way to dodge them. TF's gold card remains one of the few unconditional, on-demand point-and-click stunts in the game. The main reason he's allowed to have it is because that's actually centric to his playstyle, as in it wasn't shoehorned in just to make him strong, it was specifically designed in that way. Since there's so many directions and angles you can approach a fight, he can exert immense pressure on the enemy team. Sure, all he does is walk up to people and stun them, then throw out damage, but in most cases that's all you need to win fights. As I said before, the main thing about gold card that makes it a way more effective stun than even AoE stuns is that it cannot miss. It's possible to sidestep an Ash Arrow or Morgana binding, but not gold card. Also, the fact that he can enter a fight from anywhere on the map, which means he could just port right on top of you while you're trying to 1v1 the enemy top laner, and then all of a sudden you get wasted. At any point Twisted Fate is invisible on the map, each member of the enemy team has to account for the possibility that they could be his next target, which can then be used to his advantage as psychological warfare. Every other champion with a global ult can be dealt with rather easily. You can escape Talia's ultimate just by walking away from it because it takes such a long time. You can escape Nocturne's ultimate by using whatever dashes or escapes you have right after he lands onto you. If you see Shen ulting his AD carry, you can just run away. But you can't really escape from TF because he only takes a second and a half, unlike other global ults which take much longer. And unlike Nocturne, who takes 2.5 seconds to channel his spear, Gold Card is instant. Like I said, he's the best at catching people out. All the things he can do are met with an equal level of vulnerability. Even though he's an amazing champion at locking down and picking off enemies one by one, ironically, he himself is also easy to lock down and pick off if out of position. Twisted Fate's mobility and poor self-peel forces players to have immaculate map awareness, as he's very good at dishing it out but not taking it, creating a very balanced dynamic where it's mostly just you against them. The hallmark of how powerful a character is in a competitive game is balance. For every strength a champion has, do they have a weakness to match it? Tally up every pro Twisted Fate has and match that with a con. For pros, high roaming potential thanks to his ultimate, good wave clear and split pushing with wild card and red card, point and click lockdown with gold card, counter stealth champions with Destiny's True Sight, high gold generation with his passive loaded dice. There might be more pros about him, but I'm just going off the top of my head. As for the cons, several bad matchups in lane, and when I say several, I mean like blind picking TF is a very risky move. Pretty much no combat mobility, he has a global TP, but once the fight starts, he's got like no dashes or anything. Low damage, at least compared to actual burst mages. Mostly single target, he does have Q and red card, but generally speaking, he's only good at taking down one person. You're not going to see him do Orianna levels of damage in a team fight. And shorter than average effective range. Bear in mind, effective range is how close you need to be to a target to use your main combo. Wildcard does have a tremendous range of 1450, but to use your W, you have to be in basic attack range, which puts you at a disadvantage against champions that can zone you out. As you can see, he's a champion with just as many weaknesses as strengths. Obviously, if you give someone with pretty much unrestricted access to anywhere on the map, you don't want to give them the same burst damage as Syndra. You also don't want to give them insane AoE damage because imagine if he could teleport right smack dab in the middle of the enemy team and use Nico ultimate, that would be pretty overpowered. But the series is called Perfectly Designed, not super overpowered. Over the years, players have developed this expectation that for a character to be considered good to play, they have to be unfair. This applies not just to League of Legends, but to any competitive landscape. As many of you know, I play Smash Bros a lot, and over there, the top tier characters all have way more positives than they do negatives. Depending on the matchup, they may actually have none at all. Even in competitive Pokemon, they have various tiers such as overused, underused, Ubers, etc. And obviously Ubers are Pokemon that are so much stronger than every other that there's basically no counterplay except other Ubers Pokemon. Twisted Fate is not meant to be a freeload champion to abuse to challenger. He's a champion with established limitations that equalize his extents. He exists to teach mid laners how to climb League of Legends the right way, not the easy way. That to me is the greatest thing about this champion. There's only so much he can do, so you as the player have to make up the difference. Mastering Twisted Fate requires exceptional map awareness, targeting, positioning, and game knowledge. You have to know exactly what you can and can't handle, and frankly speaking, a lot of players don't. It's typically expected for one-dimensional champions with very cut-and-dry playstyles to perform worse the higher you go in rankings. A very well-known case of this is Darius, notorious for dominating most of Platinum and below due to his brutishly high damage and durability, coupled by a general lack of understanding of how to punish him. But as you go up to High Diamond, Master, and Challenger, he's not the same unstoppable killing machine. I mean, he is still viable, it's not like he got shadow nerfed, but more people are able to abuse his weak points in lane where he usually is supposed to win. TF is one of the few linear champions in the game that actually gets better the higher up you go, which is a major testament to the importance of macro. That may sound like a bold statement with such an abundance of Reddit montage plays where you see all these Zed, Yasuo, Riven, Vayne one-tricks making flashy outplays. So many people place an overinflated amount of importance on mechanics, thinking that the secret to hitting Challenger in League is just having better micro than your team. No, the only reason people care so much about micro is to make up for their micro penis. Sorry, that was a little mean. What I meant to say was, Twisted Fate is considered useless in low elo because very few players down there, if any, have a strong sense of macro mechanics. But in the upper echelons of League, macro takes you much further than how well you can animation cancel. While it's possible for any champion to experience success in any division, TF can teach you more about League of Legends and the scope of its gameplay than pretty much any champion in the game. He literally has only 2 attacks. There's almost no way you can mechanically screw up on this champion because all you do is cycle through your cards and throw Qs. So if he's the silver bullet to learning macro, why don't many people play him? It's mostly because to get the hang of him it takes a lot of patience, far beyond what many players are willing to put in. He's also a very humble champion. Despite his amazing global pressure, he's not exactly the most appreciated guy out there. And that stems from, again, his ability to put his team in advantageous positions to the point where they can mess it up so badly and still come out on top. And though I've given him a lot of praise so far, he is sort of a boring champion. Players might consider his split push and roaming potential to be really cool for a couple of games, but when your playstyle revolves around just Q, W, Q, W, Q, W, Q, W, it does get kinda stale. Furthermore, if you take a look at this popularity chart, his pick rate used to be high enough to be in contention for a Why Everyone Plays episode, but he's starting to drop off a little bit, which might look strange because he received basically no nerfs between Season 6 and 9. Even though I argue that he's a very secure champion and will continue to be for a long time, the fact of the matter is, his greatest asset being his amazing roaming potential is becoming less and less significant. Mobility has been creeping up gradually across the board. Champions are a lot faster than ever before. Not just new champions with a billion dashes or reworks to old champions to make them faster, but things like items or even changes to the Rift. With the inclusion of blast cones throughout the jungle, champions can hop over walls and save up to minutes of walking time roaming throughout over the course of a game, and there's even the occasional cloud rift which makes roaming even faster. Add in the Season 11 item reworks with certain mythics giving passive movement speed or items in general giving champions more speed, and even characters without global mobility can rotate from top to mid or mid to bot relatively quickly. Of course, they're nowhere close to beating TF's ultimate, but the gap has been bridged, if only just a little bit. Does this negate every positive aspect of his design? Absolutely not. He's aging for sure, yes, but considering how he was like a day 1 champion and is still one of the most reliable mid laners in the game with a very straightforward kit is saying a lot. Remember what I said before, a perfectly designed champion is one with both clear strengths and weaknesses, which is why they have a middling pick rate, not too high and not too low. The champions with low play rates often have way more flaws than they do assets, and the champions with high play rates often have way more assets than they do flaws. One other unnoticed benefit is that most experience you garner playing as TF can transfer over to just about any other champion in the game. That elevated map awareness and understanding of positioning, enemy threat management, etc. will not only help improve your results on TF himself, but they will carry over with you as you pick up other champions. The reason you see so many Riven, Yasuo, or Rengar one-tricks run it down if they pick any other champion is because their one-trick can pull off stuff no other champion ever can, and they develop habits around that for better or worse. But again, aside from his ultimate, Q is a skill shot that does damage, and W gives him a fancy basic attack. This guy has virtually zero mechanics, so you have no mechanics to carry you through bad situations. This also means if you switch over to another mid laner with a high skill floor like maybe Cassiopeia, you'll have both that and amazing game knowledge. I wanted to make Twisted Fate and Fiddlesticks my first 2 episodes mostly just because they do a fantastic job teaching players. They're not super overpowered nor are they underwhelming, they're just good enough to make it worth your time. And the return on investment may not exactly come to you in the form of LP, but experience which will ultimately become LP in the long run. A lot of times, what holds players back is not that they can't execute combos correctly, but because they just don't know the game. Picking meta champions that are quote-unquote freeload doesn't make for a high-level player. Actually learning the game does, and I can't think of a better mid laner to teach you that than Twisted Fate. If you enjoyed the video, a rating would be much appreciated, and if you'd like to see more content like this, consider subbing to the channel. Don't forget to check out the video description for links to my Discord and social medias, and if you haven't yet, consider checking out my perfectly designed episode on Fiddlesticks. I promise you it will be worth your time. But for now, that's it for today. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you again soon for the next one. Take care.